Hot news! Trump wins another battle against the left's persecution. Fani Willis, the lead prosecutor in the Georgia election interference case, has finally been disqualified. This represents a crushing victory for Donald Trump. Meanwhile, the liberal media is crumbling in the face of truths they can no longer hide. But what does this mean for Donald Trump and for Americans? Understand everything they want to hide from you. In this video, everything will be revealed.
In this hour with breaking news just into CNN, the Georgia prosecutor leading the state's election interference case against President-elect Donald Trump is now disqualified. CNN's Caitlin Polance is here with more. Caitlin, what can you tell us about this? This is just coming in the last several minutes. This is a big development.
A big development, and a big development that Donald Trump has wanted for a long time. That case against him in Georgia, the criminal case, where it's accusing him and several others of a racketeering conspiracy related to the 2020 election, it's already been paused. Now, it's not even backburnered. This is a case that will be dead in the water because the Georgia Court of Appeals is now saying that Fani Willis, the leader of the prosecution against Donald Trump, the district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, she should be disqualified from being able to bring that case. The Georgia Court of Appeals is saying that it's a significant appearance of impropriety caused by the conduct of a public prosecutor. That is Willis, how she behaved, how she was speaking about the case, about Trump publicly, about how she was having a relationship with the top prosecutor that was concealed in this, a man named Nathan Wade. All of that, previously, the trial level judge had looked at and said, Fani Willis can stay on this case. We're not dismissing the indictment, but the Court of Appeals is now taking another look and saying, no, the trial judge was wrong. Fani Willis should be disqualified from continuing to lead this case. It would be a long process, or it will be a long process, to replace her, which is why I say this case is dead in the water now without Fani Willis, the person who was leading this case against Donald Trump in Fulton County. And just to keep tabs on how many cases there are against Donald Trump criminally, the other two in federal court, January 6th, and classified documents, those are dismissed. And then the additional case in New York City, where he was set to be sentenced, that sentencing is now not happening. So as Donald Trump enters the presidency, each of these courts that is handling a criminal case is essentially removing that issue from him to have to deal with in any period of time in the near future.
This is a big victory for Trump, who has been facing a series of unfair and politically motivated accusations. But what's really at stake here isn't just Donald Trump's future, but the future of justice in the United States. CNN, as always, trying to downplay the impact of this decision. But let's see how Fox reacted to this. Now let's see how Fox addressed this situation.
Today, disqualified District Attorney Fani Willis and her team from prosecuting President-elect Trump in his election interference case. Fox 5 Atlanta reporter Tyler Finger has more details from Atlanta. Let's listen.
For months, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis publicly and defiantly said there was nothing improper with her personal relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade, who she hired to handle the election interference case against President-elect Donald Trump and others.
This is the truth, Judge. And it is a lie. It is a lie.
Attorneys for Mr. Trump and others argued Willis improperly benefited from her romance with Wade. In March, Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee ruled the relationship between Willis and Wade was a, quote, tremendous lapse in judgment, but said she could continue to prosecute the case if Wade resigned, which she did. But Thursday, the Georgia Court of Appeals disagreed and disqualified her.
The only reason this case is being litigated is because of Fani Willis's relationship choices and how she discussed and explained that relationship to the court when there was an inquiry.
In this 31-page 2-1 ruling, the appeals court panel wrote, "This is the rare case in which disqualification is mandated and no other remedy will suffice to restore public confidence in the integrity of these proceedings."
The Court of Appeals is very clear in its decision that Fani Willis made terrible errors in judgment when it came to discussing her relationship with Nathan Wade.
It wasn't a clear-cut decision for the appeals court. Judge Benjamin Land disagreed with the ruling, writing, quote, "I am particularly troubled by the fact that the majority has taken what has long been a discretionary decision for the trial court to make and converted it to something else entirely."
The Georgia Court of Appeals ruling disqualifying Fani Willis's office from pursuing the case against incoming President Trump is based on some pretty strong law.
The president-elect's Georgia attorney, Steve Sadow, said the decision was, quote, "well-reasoned and just." He went on to say, quote, "This decision puts an end to a politically motivated persecution of the next president of the United States," end quote. With DA Willis out, it will be up to the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia to find another prosecutor to decide whether to continue to pursue the case. Willis's office says it plans to appeal the ruling to the state Supreme Court.
This is a setup by the Court of Appeals. It's basically a softball to the Georgia Supreme Court, so the Georgia Supreme Court can really nail down these conflict rules and set a policy for the entire state.
Fani Willis, who was accused of bias and having a suspicious connection with the lead prosecutor, Nathan Waney, has not only been unmasked, but has also been disqualified. And this is a devastating blow to the credibility of the charges against Trump. Meanwhile, other cases against Trump have been dismissed. And that's not a coincidence, right? Is the judicial system moving away from a hunt that should have never happened? That's not a coincidence, right? Is the judicial system moving away from a witch hunt that should have never existed? Did you see how it's not impossible to convey the truth? Check out what else will also be discussed.
All right, we thank Fox 5 Atlanta reporter Tyler Finger for putting that together. Quite comprehensive look there. We do have the full statement from Trump's lead attorney on this case, Steve Sadow. He says the Georgia Court of Appeals, in a well-reasoned and just decision, has held that DA Fani Willis's misconduct in the case against President Trump requires the disqualification of Willis and her office. The court highlighted that Willis's misconduct created an odor of mendacity and an appearance of impropriety that could only be cured by the disqualification of her and her entire office. As the court rightfully noted, only the remedy of disqualification will suffice to restore public confidence. This decision puts an end to a politically motivated persecution of the next president of the United States here. Also, though, I want to put this up. Hugo Lowell there, reporter at The Guardian, tweeting this out. It's a screen grab there of the order to intend to file an appeal by Willis and her team. She has filed notice that she will appeal her disqualification from the Trump case to the Georgia Supreme.
CNN on the left actually wanted to see Trump behind bars. That has always been their intention. See Trump in jail. But serious journalism, like Fox, is showing the truth. And with this disqualification of Fani Willis, what remains of these processes is an empty shell. And she wasn't just disqualified, but unmasked as a symbol of persecution. Should have never existed, right? And as Trump has always said in his campaigns, truth always prevails. And this time is no different. The truth is coming to light. But why is this victory so significant for Trump and his supporters? Keep watching and see the details of this case.
Stimson, for more analysis on this, colleague, good to see you here. And I just want to read this yet again because I'm going to ask you, was this as plain as day? Was this a definitive enough ruling to have said to the lower court, no more, no further? They said this, that we reverse the trial court's denial of the appellant's motion to disqualify DA Willis and her office. They say it recognizes that, quote, an appearance of impropriety generally is not enough to support disqualification. They say this is the rare case in which disqualification is mandated and no other remedy will suffice to restore public confidence. You can't get any more definitive than that, though I have to note the ruling there at the appellate level, it was 2-1. It was not unanimous.
So, of course, the loser was always going to appeal, or at least consider an appeal of this appeals court decision. And I'm not surprised that Fani Willis says she's going to appeal this. Now, she's not a constitutional scholar. She's not a particularly impressive attorney, for that matter. So other people in the appellate division or other people who are advising her who are more steeped in the constitutional provisions and the ethics rules of the state may advise her that it's a losing proposition. I don't know the makeup of the Georgia Supreme Court, but I think it's important to step back for a moment because I've been predicting all along that she would be recused eventually and her office would be recused. Because remember, the job of the prosecutor, there's 2,300 elected DAs around the country and tens of thousands of people who work for them, is not to get a conviction. It's to do justice. It's a very different role than what you see on Law and Order or that's perceived, that's sort of put out there. And so to do justice, you have a higher standard. Justice Jackson, Robert P. Jackson, who was on the Supreme Court and then was the chief prosecutor in the Nuremberg trials, wrote eloquently about the role of the prosecutor. And so the public has to have confidence that prosecutors are above board. Whether they're Democrats, Republicans, Independents, irrelevant. It's do justice. So the appearance issue here, and you read this long opinion, which I did a couple times today, the stench that happened before will continue forward if she stays on the case. So I don't think if there is actually an appeal that's noted before the Georgia Supreme Court, that they're going to just willy-nilly disagree with the appeals court, because the stench of that impropriety is going to pervade if she stays on the case.
I mean, so Kalia, you're essentially saying, you're arguing that this was a foregone conclusion based on what we know about the case, based on what we know about the alleged impropriety, or at least the appearance of, with this romantic relationship with then Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade and Fani Willis here. You're saying this was in the cards from the get-go at the appellate level?
Well, there's no such thing as a sure thing in the law. Right? These are humans interpreting facts and applying the facts to the law. So it's not like you stick a quarter in and you get a gumball out of the machine. I mean, it's not automatic. But I've been arguing from the very beginning that this type of behavior, and by the way, set aside the fact that her disposition and her approach on the stand and elsewhere is not the type of cool, calm, and collected, rational, prudent person you want making life and death decisions about people's liberty interests. She does not have the demeanor of what you would expect from a public prosecutor. Set that aside. The fact that she hired her lover, who was not an expert in RICO cases, lied about it forever. He's running back and forth to the White House. And then she takes actions and then dissembles on the stand. That is a bad look for any prosecutor in any jurisdiction. And so I just do not think, looking at the findings of this appeals court, the Supreme Court, and by the way, I don't know if the Supreme Court of Georgia is like the U.S. Supreme Court. They could deny taking up the appeal. They could say, we don't want this hot potato.
So, Cully, I have to ask, why not just stop there at Fani Willis? Why not just disqualify her alone? The ruling today disqualified her whole office. All the assistant district attorneys that were on the case, they cannot take this case up at all here. So what happens to the case? But for that ruling there, her office can't touch it. Why didn't the appellate court, the panel there, just dismiss it outright here? Or can it be prosecuted in another jurisdiction?
So if I was wearing my robes like I used to be a judge, I would object on your multiple compound question. But let me peel back a couple if I can. Number one, once you remove and recuse the head dog, the DA, by definition, the whole office is recused. You can't set up a Chinese wall, and that's what it's called in the law, between herself and her subordinates. So remember years ago, during the Jussie Smollett fiasco in Chicago, when the special prosecutor Dan Webb was assigned and found that Kim Fox needed to be recused, he recused the whole office. So it's once you remove the chief prosecutor, all the subordinates of the chief prosecutor are off the case. Now, this goes now, if she does not take an appeal, to the essentially what I would call the central prosecutor in Georgia. It's a prosecuting association. And then that entity decides which DA's office to essentially deal it out to, like a croupier, a card dealer. Now, you can imagine some DA offices might be like, we don't want this case. But they could just assign it to another county DA. And then that person, man or woman, whoever's the head DA, will then take a fresh set of eyes and look at the case and decide whether or not to move forward with the case or dismiss the indictment, reinvestigate, and decide to move forward. So this case is not over, but it has suffered a mortal blow for Fani Willis and her office.
While CNN on the left tries to paint Trump as the enemy, Fox, with its serious journalism, is bringing out the whole truth. The mainstream media has failed, right, folks? And now, with this disqualification of Fani Willis, this battle is completely lost for them. Donald Trump won another battle against this corrupt system. It's time for us to wake up and see the truth. That was the video for now. I hope you all enjoyed it. Subscribe, share, and leave in the comments what can be done to have future free from corruption. Thank you all so much. See you in our next video.